I usually like to start out by saying that I feel like, you know how you have like the whole cradle Catholic, that kind of vibe. Um,
Hmm.
I almost kind of think that I'm the closest thing to a cradle pagan that could exist, and not for
Interesting.
any reason that like I was brought up with the beliefs or anything like that. But I was always my uh, growing up as a kid, like mythology was always just part of my life. My dad used to read mythology stories to me and whatnot. So that was always kind of part of my identity, and he also instilled in me the idea that like my last name is Norris, so you know it's a Norse name. I mean, it literally just means Norse. So my father instilled in me this like kind of pride for that, you know, and he was like, you know, we were Vikings and everything like that. And
You have the
so,
look, by the way, bro. You have the look. Like I
well,
kind
thank you, thank you, thank you.
of.
Yeah, so it was exactly so like that. Basically, it was just I kind of grew up with it, but despite that, of course, my family was nominally Christian. We would go to, you know, the holidays and whatnot, but it wasn't particularly serious. And I did go to a Christian school as well for primary school, but and it was good. I liked it for sure. But it was a Protestant thing, you know, and it was like an evangelical American Protestant, so like. Um, Not very traditional, and I definitely always kind of wanted that vibe. I'm certainly envious of people who grew up in like a traditional Catholic or Orthodox church and whatnot. I can understand.
Oh,
Yeah,
same.
it's
That's
oh
what I
yeah,
grew
yeah.
up
It's
in.
it's an it's a nice feeling.
It is. It's really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm definitely envious of that. But nonetheless, like yeah, I just growing up with that kind of background and whatnot, and I was always also like big into the classics. So that would be things like, well, I took Latin in high school, so that's definitely been a part of my background. And then around high school, after high school and whatnot, I would say that I definitely became I enamored with atheism. I don't know how else to say it, but you know, you go through the atheist phase, right? Everybody does. Um, and so I went through that phase of my life. I even went through like a Marxist phase. Um,
Interesting. Not
yeah,
too bad.
yeah, really, really crazy. My Latin teacher actually was a socialist from Bulgaria. She was a Bulgarian socialist, and so she kind of introduced me to those ideas. And I was like, oh well, she's a smart woman, so um, so it makes sense, right? But then over time, you know, you graduate out of those kinds of thought processes and stuff, move into more kind of classical liberal ideas, enlightenment ideas and whatnot, but still like, you know, without like the religious aspect to it. And then over time beyond that, I read Nietzsche, um, got into the death of God, realized that it's such a huge, gigantic problem for humanity to deal with not having a connection to the divine. That I was like, okay, well, so I obviously need this in my life, because otherwise, like, there's nothing that grounds you to reality. Like, a, you can't have a morality without it, basically.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so and then hearing arguments like the transcendental argument for God and things like this, those that all kind of came into play, and I was like, well, gosh, there is kind of an order to the universe. Why would that be? And then beyond that, I go, well, okay, so there's the path of Christianity, definitely a good path. I like that. Nothing wrong with that. But then I, of course, discovered that, well, there was also the alternative path, which was paganism, which was like the revival of my own ancestral beliefs that I always really had a connection to. Kind of made sense. So I just went ahead and pursued that. Found organizations that are doing those kinds of things, bringing everything back. Um, Joined up with one, started going to events, and yeah, from there, I people said that they really liked the attitude I brought, and like they said that I was a good speaker and I guess I could conduct ritual. They thought, and
They-
so they were pushing me to join the clergy program within the organization. So I've you have to be a member for a certain amount of time and whatnot before you can move into that program. So I'm coming up to the point when I can join that program. So I'm excited.
Very interesting. Like I like the way your personal story there kind of articulates the way I would clash up against this problem and the way I understand it in my mind. Because like I being Nietzsche pilled, like I'm no exception to anything. You know, I'm quite an interesting person because a lot of people who come, there's a fucking statement. I'm interested in relation to the boyos because I noticed that when I talk to a lot of the lads, they're like, what happens is I had Richard Dawkins and I was a fucking militant atheist. And then I found Jordan Peterson and I got back and now I'm a Christian. And I was always very pro-God. Like in those Richard Dawkins arguments, I'd be arguing for the religious people. And I was sort of not quite Christian, if you will, but I would always be taking his side. And even back in like college, like I would think about the Romans, and instead of being like, yeah, the Romans crushed the Jews and they crushed Christianity and all this, but Christianity eventually took over it. I was always being like, it's amazing how the statement of a man, one man, Jesus Christ, was enough to become king, emperor of Rome. Like there's something incredible about that conquest. And I always had that mindset. But then even growing up, obviously the Nietzsche pill is a pretty heavy one. It's a pretty difficult one to digest, but it does put you in that position where you actually, it's almost like the one thing he does is he pulls back the curtains and says, don't you see what's actually happening? Like it doesn't matter if you're a Christian because you've got a Starbucks in your church. That's the symbol of just how materialistic everything has become. There's no escaping this almighty suck that's going on right now. That's just like absolutely destroying the future of our ability to connect with the transcendent, as you're saying it. And so one thing that's really been like a big deal for me, this literally was like soul pilling for me, was that emotion of realizing that, you know, there's divine principles like Platonism, divine principles in the universe that hold it together, and they may as well be God. Like they're that perfect. They definitely exist. There's no real way you can argue around it. There is something like that there. As I always say, like the laws of music exist, and you have to obey them. You want to make good music. Like the universe is no exception to that rule. In fact, the reason why music is like that is because it's one of the most brilliant descriptions of the universe that we can achieve. And so I'm sort of at the point now, like where what I'm wrestling with in my head philosophically, and I don't think about it too much, but it's on my mind. Like it is something that I wonder about, being like, I almost don't have a problem with the idea that there's God, or there's like the big G, or the big divine, or the big power, or the eternal principles. Like I find that difficult. I can actually find peace in that. Like there is a world out there I can interact with, and there's an order that will, if I obey it, will produce good and beauty. And that's actually like unbelievably redeeming and freeing. And I don't see that as in any way incongruent with with modern science. That actually kind of makes sense to me. But one thing I'm caught up on, and this is a hard one for me, is that order the creation of a present and moving God through the universe, and was Jesus Christ his son? Or was it something akin to the Platonic idea of it's almost like the monad at the center, and Odin and all these gods are actually representations of that experience of ecstasy you have when you get close to, you know, the source or whatever it is. And I think that's called perennialism. I don't know this stuff very, very well, so I guess I will be asking you a bit. But the way I'm talking through this, would you consider that the dichotomy that you're looking at? Like on one hand, you have this sort of perennial Platonic pagan view of what divinity is, versus the Christian, I guess it's centered on Jesus Christ conception of what divinity is. Or do I have this wrong or incorrectly conceptualized in my mind?
I would say that's accurate. I definitely fall into, it kind of goes without saying, the more like Platonist school of thought. That's definitely, I think the Neoplatonist work definitely informs my views, because oftentimes I think that they're super congruous with Hinduism as well, which of course is related to the Indo-European pagan families. So I think it makes perfect sense that would be the case. But yeah, it is a dichotomy between the type of monotheism that is Christianity versus the idea of, because it's not necessarily monotheism versus polytheism, but it's almost like monotheism versus monism is like kind of what you describe the other side of the coin to be. Um, uh, but I also don't even know if that's entirely accurate, because like to just sort of lump everything into as being part of the monad, I think
Yeah, yeah.
that it's an easy thing to do, sure, but it also, you lose a lot of the differentiating qualities between that. So like, and also like you can't, as a human, you can't like reasonably perceive that kind of exist, because you're asking to perceive all of existence at once, and that's like not gonna happen. I don't even know if like, I think like you have to, I don't even know if like most of the like lesser gods can get to that level. I think you have to be like at like top tier like Odin level consciousness to be able to perceive, and even he like probably doesn't do it like all the time, because like that seems like a hassle to be like, oh yes, I am one and everything is the same thing, and like I don't know, that would just be really difficult. So yeah, I mean, so it might be, that might be accurate, but that's also not particularly productive to think of it in those terms. So in your own life, it's almost more productive to just kind of see everything as the differentiated equation rather than the one whole. But to know that like at the end of the day, there kind of is the one whole, I guess.
Yeah, and see, this is the thing is, I'm not necessarily making any statements about the nature of that ultimately. Like my approach has always been the musical idea, whereas like to know music theory is very little to do with actually being able to play. And actually, it's more important to be able to play well and not really know the exact nature of the rules, but have a sort of intuitive grasp of them,
Hmm.
as opposed to like articulate out the music theory perfectly, because that doesn't really achieve anything. Like that's just kind of like autistic in some sense. Like what you've done nothing in that type of sense. So what I'm getting at with this is I think like so what we wanted to talk about was the you were suggesting that you want to put your head towards the idea of offering a philosophical alternative to Christianity. And look, I don't want to be too reactionary or anything like that, but I kind of think I know what you're saying in terms of that. I'm just trying to make sure I am saying the same thing as you, in that Christianity proposed this idea that there was the loving creator and he created the universe. And the universe is almost like a thing that he is using with a destiny that has a point at the end of it that he's leading it towards. And that's the Christian Abrahamic monotheistic idea. And of course, the achievement of the kingdom of heaven and perhaps even the kingdom of Israel, as it's known to the Christians, is what's going to be the end goal, and it all is moving towards that. And does paganism propose something closer to the idea? Like I read this in Nietzsche as well, is that the universe is almost eternal. It was always there. There's these philosophical first principles built into it. In some sense, we can't really know them, and that's like, Odin would bring you up to them, and that's the ecstasy of Odinism or something like that. But fundamentally, like, you can't really know them, but they are there. You have that hunch, but the idea of them having a will, that they're like, do you get what I'm saying? The idea of these superpowers having like a will that's they're steering reality with, is that really kosher? Like, does that really make sense? Is that what paganism would be contrasting itself against Christianity with? Like, how am I supposed to understand that?
That sounds pretty spot on. Yeah, I think so. The idea that there's a that the universe just kind of is, and there are forces at play that can kind of steer things in a certain direction, but they have to play by the rules of the universe. That seems pretty accurate to me. And we have all kinds of jargon and whatnot for those terms and everything, but like the brass tacks of it is that the universe exists, and you have to take it as it is. And there are laws, there are rules in the universe, and there are gods with powers that are like universal level powers, but even they have to play by the rules of the universe. But they can kind of direct things this or that way.
And so that's very interesting. So like, because this is stuff like I just haven't given it enough thought, but I'm sure it makes sense. But I guess like if you were to philosophically articulate paganism, and I don't even think paganism is a good word, because that's just essentially a slander word. Like it is just a like, oh, those barbarians. That's kind of what it means. But if you were to offer like a a philosophical alternative that made sense. Because I think the strength of Christianity, although it struggles nowadays, but the strength of it is that idea that, well, if that order exists in the universe, something had to have made it, and that is God. And that strikes me, that's always struck me as a very good argument for that. Like, this is the sort of conflict I'd have now, is that I think to myself, well, that order is there, like, fuck, well, it must have been made by someone, and it kind of makes sense that it's the Christian one because he's done so well. But then at the same time, I can sort of see vaguely the other argument that it's like samsara, where it's like that stuff has just always been there for eternity. But that's a very hard idea for my human mind to get around, is that where did it come from? Was there a beginning? And it is the statement that there was no beginning, it was everlasting, or it's endlessly cyclical? Like, how am I supposed to look at this?
We would agree with the Indo-European frame of cyclical time. So the universe, or like the multiverse, or however you want to frame it, that has always existed in some form. It may not have been as complex as it is now, but in some form it did exist, and it was the cycle of creation and destruction, the Ragnarok cycle, that brought us to where we are now. And so the cycle continues. It always will. And within the whole cycle, there are like mini cycles too. It can kind of get really complex, like the more you look into it, especially like Hindu theory. But
Well,
go ahead.
What's interesting about this is that, like, Stephen Hawkins proposed something very similar to that the Big Bang was the big, I think it was called the Big Clap. So what happened is, the reason why the Big Bang happened is because there was this other universe that clashed together and started another boom, and then it will go back again, and that's just been happening for all of time till the end of eternity. And it's, I guess, a statement about everlasting eternity as the firm reality underneath things. Like, it's a very, very intense idea, because it's easy for me to think of the idea that the universe started and became something, and that's why we're here. But there's so much complicated problems there, because, like, if it started, what was there beforehand? And you're like, well, that's God. But, like, what the fuck is God? But then if you make a statement, because I guess this is the thesis that you have to have underneath it, and what does it mean? I think what I'm trying to articulate here is that if you believe that God started the universe, he has intention built into the universe, and you must obey his intention, and he's almost an active part of it, and that his will is moving through the universe, and you should by all means submit to his will completely. Whereas this other view has this idea that it's almost like this eternal thing that might not necessarily have the will that we think of with trying to move the universe towards something, and instead you are the thing that chooses. You are the will. You are the quote unquote the will to power underneath it. And so something like Odin is like that consciousness that reaches all the way up to the eternal principles and experiences that ecstasy, which is what happens as a musician when you reach the harmony rules and you experience the ecstasy of beauty. And it's a very, very similar idea as far as I understand it. So, like, gods are various phenomenon as they get closer to the superpowers, if you will. But all of this stuff is, I don't know, am I just bastardizing paganism to suit my little Irish mind or something like that? I'm not really too sure. Look, I've riffed a lot, and I just wanted to get that stuff out there because I think that's the foundation of what we want to talk about. But a lot of this, I'm sure Olafur has plenty to say, and I'd love to hear if he's got anything to drop in.
Yeah.
Hey, your mic, bro. Your mic. Jesus, come on.
Rhythm mistakes. Yeah, I was just regarding the, like, if we take the scientific approach, I would highly recommend Sir Roger Penrose's explanation for his cyclical model, because it literally, he has an endpoint and a reason for the endpoint to collapse into the singularity that then becomes the Big Bang again.
Yes.
It takes like an hour or something for him to run it through, but it's even though it's like really, let's say, high quality math stuff, it's you get the point quite quickly. But yeah, well, it was also because you struck a chord with that. Like in paganism, for me, I see more the universe. It's less an active force, like, because if it's and not saying that it's without intent, but definitely that the actors within it are individuals that have to take actions upon it, and even the gods have to obey as Connor said, certain rules and certain and they have to follow the rules, and especially the even the creation myth, have the Icelandic version of the mirror. It's actually Odin speaking to like an oracle. So and that must imply that he himself isn't all-knowing, and there is this force that he is communicating with, and through that conversation, even though she like Hávamal means Háva is the highest ones, and Mál means speak. So this is actually referring to Odin, but it's kind of like how his words will make something as well, even though it's also I'm a kind of a dialogue between him and the Vala, or the what's the English? What's the proper English
The
word?
Cirrus, maybe.
Yeah. It's okay. It's called Vala in Icelandic, but it is the Cirrus.
The vulva.
That makes sense. And actually, there's a quick funny one, because in modern Icelandic we don't like to incorporate like English words into, or French words into our language. So we always, when there are new inventions, we always have to come up with something new. And actually the word for computer is we took the word for the Cirrus or the oracle, and we blended it with the word of numbers. So we call it, instead of Völva, we call it Tölva. So it's a number series that I'm sitting with right now.
A number oracle. That's
that's brilliant.
Cool.
I love that.
It's there's like, because the language has been so untouched even since the Viking Age, because we are just isolated barbarics up here who didn't evolve like the rest of Europe's. The language has been, it's quite like, the culture of it has been very protective, and it hasn't been influenced that much because people were not so interested to come here, and at the same time people were not let's say were not eager to import any foreign words and so forth. So that was just a couple of things, because there's also actually a lot of individualism built into the there's lots of do's and don'ts, like drink with moderation and all sorts of like kind of good households advices in those texts.
Well, yes, that is very much something that I'm noticing about this conversation. I actually think this is a way bigger conversation than we ever give anyone credit for. Max, hello Max. I'm just gonna mute you there for a sec because there's some audio coming through. It's an unbelievable amount of a very, very interesting problem right now, because we seem to be in this, the death of God, and everyone's trying to figure out how to put back the idea of morality on the table. And there's this tendency where people are trying to do it like Sam Harris or Jordan Peterson in this sort of psycho-scientific way of some sort. And I think if you go with, I don't know, do you know E. Michael Jones, Connor? Yeah. So he goes with that idea of the logos. He's also the logos, man. The logos, and he loves that. And that's actually like really brilliant idea and really interesting. And I think he gives a unbelievable good case for Christianity because of that. But as I'm saying, that thinking through that idea myself brought me to the idea of like, oh well, there sort of is a logos to the universe. And then, as I said, the question is, was that logos put there by the creator, who is the Abrahamic God? Was it a God who was not the Abrahamic God, and that's just a take on this ultimate God? Or maybe from that derivative idea, you get this sort of pagan idea, which is you can't really know for certain what the hell that ultimate reality is, like the Brahman, as they used to call it. But you can only ever have a relationship with it. And the difference between Abrahamism and this is that
the Abrahamic God has this sort of implicit morality built into it, where you must obey the book and serve the magic book, which is telling you exactly what you should do, and you must submit totally. And there's this kind of moral code built into it that's very, very, very specific. Whereas this more, shall we say, pagan worldview, it does come across as interestingly individualistic, in that you build a relationship with this thing, but it is indifferent. It's an indifferent God. It doesn't care about you. It doesn't interact with the world the way the other one does. And that gives this idea almost of like a morality of merit. Like it is a sort of Indo-European idea where you work your way up, quote unquote, the mountain towards the monad, and you get rewarded with hitting the high note, which is the ecstasy of the berserk experience of like, you know, I am the winner or something like that. And I know it's all kind of crass the way I'm describing it, but I think I have to go crass just for the sake of illustration. But
I also just to top that off,
no, go on.
could ask a question to you, Connor, because like I see the juiciness of the stories, but like I think my main problem is both the dichotomy between Christianity and paganism, because a lot of this is built up historically, and there is like a difference in the moral system between like Christianity solves something that paganism doesn't solve, and that let's like what paganism lacks is Jesus, in a sense, because paganism there's this in orthodoxy, like Jesus fills the entire hierarchy, so the way to transcend suffering is to like bear it nobly on your shoulders, and that's the Christian solution to evil as well. And that is quite powerful, because in paganism it's more like you murder everything around you, and you simply just, and if you're poor you're dead, and there is and the funny thing is there is very little suffering, other than if you break, like if you could say Loki suffers a lot because he's a trickster and he's lying, so he gets punished for his deeds with like tremendous suffering. And like the reasons we have, like there are a lot of earthquakes here in Iceland, and it's Loki's who is he gets it's venom dripping from some sort of snake that is dripping into one of his wounds, and he's shaking, and that's the reason those people said that we have earthquakes. It's Loki's trembling. So
Jesus Christ.
but because he is being tortured, but it's kind of like it really is a winner takes all. So I was kind of wondering in the modern context of this, because to me I'm having difficulties separating the like cultural stuff that is Icelandic and that is pagan at heart, because we celebrate a lot of stuff that is not celebrated anywhere else. And we even like have the old calendar months that are that are not like the Julianic calendar systems that we still celebrate. And the bloat, as it's called, you probably heard that term, Connor. And so for me, it's, and I also think that is why Catholicism didn't work in the northern.
Wait, what?
No, I'm dead serious about this. But like there's a reason for why Catholicism and even Rome, like, okay, Rome tried to go north.
Oh, okay, like I can forgive you for the Catholicism thing.
No, let me finish, man. Rome went straight north. They hit very big and terrifying people. They turned left. There is France. There were soft people. And they kept going north. And then they went over to some island, and there were many more soft people there.
Oh, all right.
And the Catholicism issue is actually, there is something, because Catholicism due to the hierarchical structure of Catholicism, it runs against, in some fundamental way, how Northerners work. And this is I've been thinking a lot about this. This is why I like Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Northern Germany. I don't know with the English, they're weird, and let's leave them out of this by now. But there is some sort of a reason why, like, and I don't know if it's like, you know, the cultural and the biology in a sense that kicks in a bit, but there is something that I have a hard time weaving together, because I can see the great solution and everything. Like, as a morality system, Christianity is better than paganism, because paganism there is like eye for an eye kind of ideals, and you can, and they would even, it was called carrying out your child, and that was like leaving, you know, your unwanted children out in the wilderness to die. And that was especially if it was like if you had made a slave pregnant and the slave wasn't of high enough quality for you. So and there was, and this is actually, this comes from, there are very good sources from around the around 1000 AD and 1100 AD, at the time where Iceland had both a pagan population and a Christian population. And they had to make, like, the last pagan chieftain, he was forced by the Danish king and so forth, but he had to make a compromise. And the compromises were that they were allowed to carry out their children, and that's kind of like a post-birth abortion. They were allowed to worship other gods, and they were allowed to eat horse meat, but only if they didn't get caught doing it. And that made the final transition into, for the Catholic Church to come in and take over. So there was a bit of a rant there as well, but how do you, like, because I'm not suggesting like the violence that it entails, and I probably think that the world is a better place without the eye for an eye stuff that is really inherent in the Norse paganism.
It is an interesting conundrum, the morality question, because of course, like, what's funny is, like, the principle that they were operating under with that morality system is so drastically different from what we have now. Because of course, to them it was like, okay, like I remember there's a law that was like, if you kill somebody, you have to pay their family money and like work as a servant maybe and stuff. But like it wasn't like you get the death penalty too or something like that, or like the punishments were very different, because of course the paradigm that they were functioning under was one that was like, okay, well, so you killed this person, but they'll just get reborn at some point later on. So it's not like they're dead forever. So it was almost like, that's why like the punishments for murder and whatnot would be lessened. And then conversely, the punishments for things like blasphemy, or inhospitality, like if you were inviting somebody as a guest and you killed them, that's like a big no-no. Like you could, because you're a traitor basically, or things like treachery. That was considered like, that was the sin that like sent you to like the really bad place. And you don't really like come out from that, like you don't come out the same person. But you know, say you killed somebody over like a girl or something like that. No big deal. Like pay the family off and whatnot, and work as a servant for them. So completely different paradigm. So it would be tough to like go back to that now, you know. There's no way that you can do it. That being said, I think that it's not a terrible thing to think about, you know, as far as like grieving and whatnot. Like it could be a nice to remember that, like, oh well, that this person will be reborn at some point in a later date. So in a way, it also kind of like eases the burden on somebody's soul. But yeah, nevertheless, like, yeah, the morality question is very, it is kind of eye for an eye in that regard. And it's a lot. There aren't any like moral commandments necessarily. I mean, like Havamal, like you brought up, it's really just advice. Odin's just giving you friendly advice, telling you like, oh, it'd be a good idea if you did this. You don't have to, but if you want to be successful, you should probably do that. But oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just, this also made me think of the whole afterlife, because it's also, the afterlife is kind of proportionate to the like amount of work that you put into this life, and like the biggest shame was to not die in action.
Yeah, Hermes just said that there. He said the lowest plane in
did he?
Norse paganism was those who die of sickness and old age. That's hell.
Yeah, exactly. And there's actually another really interesting wording, because it's I think this is their interpretation of what we experience as the void today, because hell, or which in modern English it's the word hell, but hell has a different meaning in Old Norse, and it means pitch darkness, like the blackest of blacks. And it's kind of like if you die in inaction, you will end up in the void. And it was also personified as this witch that was of like, it's cold and icy and pitch black, and that is where you go. And there's like a saying that like he went to lie with his sword, which actually means that if you lived like to become an old man, you would have this ritual where you would kind of like lay yourself upon your own sword to die, like not in combat, but die by a weapon. To not to be able to go to hell. And this is also where the Baldur, or is how do you, what's his American?
Baldur.
Baldur.
Yeah. Baldur. Okay. Baldur. He doesn't die in combat, and he ends up in hell, to later to be released at Ragnarök. But it's quite interesting, that notion of like, yeah, you better die in action or be a. Yeah.
So yes, and these like, so the two, I guess the three things we've already brought up so far, and I want to actually approach this with a level of level-headed seriousness, in that like the philosophical first principles are actually just such a difficult, huge problem, because some parts of science sort of offer themselves to the pagan interpretation. Nietzsche creates a morality to deal with that, being like, guys, like that's actually, we've got a serious scientific problem in that the science seems to indicate something that's not necessarily Christian. Then you have the Christian thing on the other side, which does have a congruence to it once we accept the idea of a logos to the universe on some level. Like it seems like there's something like that is going on. And then the morality question becomes a really big one. Now I want to push this up, like platform it this way. Like I understand stuff like leaving your babies out to die is intense, but I'm not in any way an advocate for this. No way. If this goes public, this is not what I'm saying. But at the same time, there is the reality of the health of races and stuff like that really depend on sometimes the ruthless nature of Mother Nature, where, for example, baby gazelles that are weak get eaten by lions, because that's how nature works and that's how things stay healthy. And you have to, as much as it's a little bit weird for us, we have to accept that there is some type of natural justice and morality to that is just feels a little bit difficult for us, but we can't really trust our instincts because of how long we've been Christian. On the other side, there's Christian morality, which for fuck's sake has some pretty good points to it as well. Like maybe that stuff is primitive and like outdated and shouldn't be taken seriously at all. And so these dichotomies are like extremely serious. The last one, of course, is what you're saying about something like the afterlife. On the one hand, atheism promises you nothing. On the other hand, Christianity promises you heaven no matter what. You just get it. for believing, and then we have this other one where it's like your deeds dictate your ends. That's a very, very interesting one. Now, what you wanted to come to talk to us, Norris, and obviously, like, this is in the context of the Boyo University, and I do want to facilitate conversations like this at a bit of a higher level, because a lot of the stuff out there is kind of junk. Like, it's like guys, like, they LARPing a bit, or then you have like people like E. Michael Jones, for example, brilliant and all that, but he would never be able to have this conversation because he just doesn't want to have that intellectual dynamism. He's just like, there's no logos in Norse paganism, and it's like, that's that. And so like, my interest would be setting this forth as a philosophical project. What first principles will we be pushing out there and suggesting this is where the tension is, and how do we talk about these tensions? Like, have we just described three? At what level are we supposed to run down to their fundamentals and figure them out? And are we able to get people in and say, look, you have to be able to steel man both sides of this? You're not allowed to just come in and be like, well, I believe this, so it's true. It has to be, can you see both sides? And would that lead us the best ability to be able to present this to other people and say, look, this is what this believes and all this? And do you follow where my head is at with this? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think that we definitely have sort of like a Hegelian dialectic here between the Christian and pagan paradigms. And what I'm wondering is there a synthesis in the middle that we can find a meeting point on? Yeah, this is scary stuff. But because certainly, like, the argument for Christianity as this great civilizing force, and it articulates rules very well. It definitely has benefits for sure, as you described. But on the other hand, it's like the pagan cosmology. It goes so well with science that it's difficult to, like, square this circle in a way. So that's the thing is it's like, well, gosh, could there be something in the middle between the two? And that's kind of the thing that I'm most interested in, because, like, as cool as, like, theories and everything are, it's like, well, okay, but what's actionable right now? Like, what can we do right now to make it happen? And yeah, that's definitely, like, the angle that I like to play with it.
Okay, I've actually some pretty big thoughts on this, but Olafur, you said you're going to say something.
Oh yeah, I just had to, like, put one little fun in there. Like, Connor, have you ever tried to, like, look at the North Pole in, like, Google Maps?
No, I haven't.
Well, you should try to do it, because it's quite interesting, because there are no images of the North Pole. And I wonder if there's a big, like, tree sticking up there somewhere.
I like where your head's at. I'm liking this. All right.
Yeah, try to Google it. There are no images of the North Pole. And there is, like, the ice ocean is not on Google Maps. So I'm just saying, a little bit suspicious. There might be something poking up there.
Or the flat Earth, for that matter. Yes, that too.
Yeah, but that's not an ice wall. It's a snake.
Yeah. Yes, you're right. You're right. Very integral point. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just before we go to serious line, can I'll just Steph, if you don't mind, because I actually found just a couple of more quite interesting linguistics.
Go right ahead, dude.
Yeah, with the Icelandic, and I've said this to Stefan because I lived in Denmark for quite a while, and having, like, two languages, you kind of start to think a lot about what the, like, actual meaning of the words you're phrasing, where they come from and what their meaning is. And I've just recently, and that has been blowing my mind, and it keeps coming, like, with more and more. So it's kind of been an endless well for me at the moment. In English, you talk about songs, and that's because you sing them. But in Icelandic, you talk about lög, and lög is the same root as the modern English word for law. And this actually ties into your, Steph's, idea with the harmony, the laws of the universe, and even at because I don't know if you know this, Connor, but Alþingi is the oldest. It's the oldest parliament that is still serving, like still today. Like it's an unbroken lineage since the Viking Age. And the man who kept the law there were called lawmakers or like creators of songs, lagasmiðir. It's actually a lawsmith, and the act of doing it. This is also quite interesting. You don't write it, you negotiate it. So when you're even in modern Icelandic, when you're like a songwriter or a lawmaker, it's the same word we use. And the process to create songs and laws is to negotiate them. Semja lög. And this also leads into like when we ask, are you okay? We say, ertu í lagi? Are you in song? Are you in law? So it's kind of like, are you properly negotiating with the reality? And this is also and also, you know, you can also use it in the different like which is just that aren't you in accordance when you get mad at people, and there was the English version of that, I guess, kind of Freudian slip there, in accordance. It's related, and this is
discord means to be out of tune.
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of an interesting thing as well, I think. And also I had one thing more written down, which I find quite fascinating. The word sacrifice that is used in Hávamál, it's soa, and that actually means to waste. Like, it's not giving up, you're wasting it. So there's also a strange, like, maybe something has altered or lost in translation, but I find this so fascinating. And we even use it like in layers of the earth is also lög. Like there are layers to the, like there's sand, there's clay and stuff like that. We also talk about lög in that sense. And this is quite interesting. And especially things like lagasmiður, it's not clear if I'm talking about a songmaker or a lawmaker.
That's amazing. Like that is just fucking amazing, because that is the thesis. I don't know, Connor, have you heard me say in the videos, but the Greeks thought the correct way to produce the law was to sing the law.
Oh yeah.
Like they go on.
This was sorry, just to interrupt. This was also due to the fact because they didn't have, this is orally transmitted, because Hávamál is only, it's written down probably in like 1200 AD, and there has been some tampering with it, because this was all orally mitigated, and they would have this phrasing to wrap the laws of the Icelandic nation, like from the year 800 AD. The lawmakers would sing the laws to remember them, or rap them. And there are different traditions even today in Icelandic where we have
they would rap them.
yeah. It's actually it's what it's called rímur, and they will also have these. Even the pagan society today, they have these like rap battles with each other, just using those old traditions, which
That's
is
hilarious.
Yeah, it's really, but it's also it's what I find quite interesting. And this also, I have 2 kids as well. They can pick up melodies way before they can start to speak. Like yeah. they can hum stuff and sing all sorts of stuff. So it's that's at a different like level in your brain. So I just find it so interesting, and these stories have lived for such a long time, and you can see there is some tampering, like there is some mentioning of like the judgmental Christ that is sometimes left in and sometimes left out in the Hávamál. And also the Ragnarök or the Armageddon ends in there are only two humans left in a garden, a man and a woman.
That's really interesting, because like I'm gonna get on a segue about this, because this is really cool. What I see is like the whole, let's say, well, expansion of life, and then you have the culling of it, so it emerges back into like something that's gonna form the new life, and let's say the more apex life. And then one thing you will see this in a similar notion would be, for example, in the Bhagavad Gita, where they would have a discussion. Well, the prince would be riding before he would go into battle, and Vishnu would come along, and they would have an argument about what his duty is. And there's always this very, nice and humble saying, like in yoga, where you'd say, well, namaste, I'm greeting the holy in you. I'm greeting the spiritual, the good, the life in you. And if you take it into the context of back then, so they would greet the people they were fighting with, they would greet with the same greeting. So it's say, well, I'm greeting the holy in you, but it doesn't mean that I'm greeting what your body is, or what's gonna, like, we're fighting over what life is, like what is gonna ascend life in itself. And then we see, like, you have parts of this in you, but the contest that we're facing, like the slaughter that we're facing, and when two armies clash, that would determine what the more holy, or what the holy then wants to be. So then you would have always this acknowledgement that things are attuned with life. Everything is somewhat holy, and it's somewhat holy and attuned with life. But the process of culling that, like you would see, like leaving the children out there to die with their weekly, or getting into the fights, to determine who would, like, do what Vishnu would say, to give the prince the reason, like, to fulfill his duty, to work for life, would imply to cull everything that is not for that. And it would imply every weakness of every other person. So they would have this process again and again and again and again, where they would just like slaughter each other, and then see, as at the end of Ragnarok, what would be at the end of all that destruction. That would be the next best thing that forms life. And then we'd have...
That's a very interesting idea. So it's the natural idea of how things evolve in nature, is that through eternal conflict you get progress, higher values and beauty and whatnot.
Yes. And you see this sometimes in historic notes as well, where they from Gothic or Scythian sources, where they would fight each other, and they would sometimes even fight if there wasn't like any reason for it, because that it had to take place. To have the most life affirming thing to do, and this is like, it sounds counterintuitive, but the most life affirming thing to do would be to give way to it, to see how it emerges. And they would have this contest in deathly battle, and see, like, there you have it, your glory exposition of life. And this is also the reason why they would say or shun people that don't die in those circumstances. It's like they didn't serve it, because they didn't participate in the selection of it, in a sense.
See, that's a very, 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 very interesting and difficult thesis, because it is that idea of it's like the Spartan idea with Leonidas. It's like, if he tried to survive, he would clearly be a weak man, and it's almost like, what would he run off and try and have another kid, and that would bring down the quality of the Spartan race. So they would rather you die and like maybe have your kid and then go out and die in battle and show that you're like a high quality, juicy person. It's like the natural selection idea. It was like pro-natural selection or something. And I think there's a very dark but interesting criticism of Christianity in that level, is that it doesn't have those standards, and that could cause some problems. Like it's a serious problem. I don't really know what to make of it, but it's something that has to be considered if you want to discuss this problem with any type of intellectual honesty. And that's a very, very difficult thing to do, and it's a scary thing to do.
Yeah, it's like seeing how a world would turn into like a one wood monocrop farm. Like, would that serve life? Every crop's equals. Like, does that work in the long run?
I'm not too sure. I don't know. Do you like soybean oil? Because I could send you a shipment if you wish.
Yes. That serves us all the best.
Yeah, I just got some water and got struck with another.
Come on.
It's and this is, I'm not sure. Okay, to fix something in Icelandic, you say the words lagfæra, which means to put into song. or put into law.
Put into harmony, yeah.
Put into harmony. That's to fix anything that's broken. If it's a car, doesn't matter. You use the word lagfæra.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Well, and I should note that even within our own personal practice, there's a school of thought that states that the ritual should be conducted in song. You should be singing when you're doing the rite. You should be singing it. And I tend to like that interpretation. And there's also the practice of Galder, which is you're taking the runes which Odin discovered and kind of enumerated. And each of the runes represents an aspect of the universe, and the runes have a deeper meaning and whatnot. But you can sing the rune's name in different ways, and that will align the harmony with these powers within the universe, and that's how you can manifest them in your own life or in other lives and whatnot. Is you're singing this innate quality of the universe to kind of strengthen it or bring it out in an aspect.
Yeah, to meditate on it, yeah. And I guess like this is what I did want to take you on and have this discussion, is because like I'd like to facilitate people to talk about this angle of looking at things. As I said, there's this awful problem where a lot of people talk about paganism and it's very larpy. But I know that there's actually a very rich, powerful philosophical stance underneath it. As we said, you align the metaphysics and contrast it with Christianity. You align the morality contrasted with Christianity, and then the afterlife and all that, and even science as well. We're having that conversation because I'd love to see it taken to a higher level, because it could be a genuine alternative that needs to be considered. Although it could also possibly, through going through it all, turn out to prove that Christianity was in fact correct, and it just has everything in a way that makes way better sense, and we should go all in on that. I really don't know. I really don't know which side of the fence to lean on. Like, I know you are coming from that angle, but like the thing I'm trying to present here is maybe this would be a useful way to say, all right, we could start this conversation, and if any boyos come my direction, like we could use this as some type of, I don't know, think tank for promoting paganism or something like that. But in order to do it correctly, would it be about saying, or what are like the first principles? How should we be thinking this? And this is really what I'm trying to get at here, is are we in a position where there is going to be a Hegelian synthesis, and we're going to be looking at an update of some sort? To get very specific on what that might look like is, for example, Nietzsche's conception of the death of God is actually way more complicated than people think. He was suggesting that the pagans were, I believe, he was suggesting that the pagans were hanging around in the ancient world, and people like Heraclitus noticed that there's a quote-unquote logos to the universe. That means like transient fire that seems to have some vague order that's very almost impossible for us to understand. And the best we can do is harmonize ourselves with this in the way that Olafur is saying. Like, we can just let ourselves understand that there's a certain hierarchy. Some things have to die for the greater good, these type of things. Like, all that morality is built into it. And that order made a very coherent and powerful sense. And a society could be built on that. The magic pyramid is the hierarchy of society, and, you know, the order of the classes and all that stuff. And that all makes sense, and it all works, and it all was doing fine. And, you know, Indo-European Europe rose up. And then what happened is Christianity comes along. He calls it the slave morality idea, and they create a fake conception of God. They sort of invent a way of seeing things that isn't true, but suits their political ends, and ends up steering things completely off track, creating this sort of like crazy way of looking at it that brings people away from understanding things like natural hierarchy and those type of things. It takes over Rome. The Romans panic. They invent Catholicism, which is essentially a blend of these two. And then that kind of pushes us forward. Over a long enough period of time, Christianity is just too powerful. And so what it does is it takes over the intellectual sphere, gets them to focus on the truth, which is what it asserts is most important, which in a sense then turns around and inverts itself, kills Christianity because it's not true. And then suddenly we found ourselves all atheists, which is Richard Dawkins. And so to take that step forward, is it some type of question of returning to this sort of like, I don't know, meta-Christian paganism of some sort? I know that sounds so crazy, but is that what we're looking at? Like, are we steaming towards something like that, where people can't obviously LARP like Odin anymore? I'm not sure if that's a thing. I'm like, I don't mean that as a rude thing. I'm not saying it that way, but like, you know, people can't just say they're Vikings and run over and like kill people and stuff like that, or and rob monasteries. Because I'm Irish, I do not want to see that behavior. Like, no, thank you. But is it a facility where we'll say stuff like, perhaps Christianity, as Nietzsche says, could have done the dangerous thing, and not Christ, but Christianity could have done the dangerous thing where it suggests to us that our emotions are evil, and then we need to actually like redeem them and take a more sophisticated view or something like that. And as I've tried to describe before, understand that perhaps all those instincts are aiming towards the good, but they're stupid, dull, and they need to be channeled towards in a very intelligent way. And is that where the war is going to be won going forward? Like, would the reconstruction of some type of European religion actually need to be a way more like an update, perhaps an innovation of some sort? And paganism would just be a tributary into that, perhaps alongside Christianity. I know that's a lot of like jargon I just brushed over there, but I think you can follow what I'm saying.
I can definitely follow. I have something to add to that made me think, because I think that there's something to the, like, that notion, and I've actually given this quite a lot of thought, because I think one of the things that scared Nietzsche was the inaction, the worst types of Christianity can put on people.
Yeah.
And what I experienced, like, when I went through my like depression in my early 20s, like, was this, I had like serious death anxiety, and it was represented as this just black void, just black ocean that you could breathe in, but you could not do anything about because it was so vast and greater than you. And I think there's really something to that notion of like, let the yield be your throne, in a sense, and that you don't get the kingdom at the end. And I've really thought a lot about like my own death, in a sense. So like, I think that you can live a life that is full enough that it can actually make the whole afterlife thing not matter, that you are willing to like give it all up, or to end your life because you have served the purpose of life itself. And I know this is kind of hard to take for a lot of people, because a lot of people are not willing to make that jump. Just like, oh, not yet, I need to like watch my sitcoms and I need to read some books when I'm retiring. But there's definitely something that at least like I get like my hairs are standing on the side of my hand right now speaking about this, that there's something to that life lived well enough justifies the eternal darkness, in a sense.
I know what you're talking about. It's like, I try to imagine what Leonidas would have felt when he faced the Persians, because he's choosing to die. And it's interesting because you'd imagine our instincts would say run away, but I guess he was saying, right, look, I've got my beautiful wife, she's had a couple of kids by me, I've got Sparta, I'm the king, I'm what, 50 years old, like maybe I get 40 more years out of myself, have a couple of steaks, proto cigars, whatever they smoked in Sparta. But it's like I've pretty much done it all, and I can't, like, this is I can't really go out on a better note than this, so I may as well go all in. And there's a great deal of wisdom psychologically in that, because it's like what are you gonna do? Just like, it's like playing a song too long, that type of thing. It's like,
oh yeah.
So you either burn out or you fade away, right?
Yes, that type of thing. But Connor, I wanted to ask your thoughts on all this, because we've said a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So let's see. Well, gosh, the idea of going out on top, that it's definitely very life affirming. It's very Nietzschean as well. Like, the idea of just living your life to the fullest, and then when your time comes, actually, I should note that like, it was considered like the height of courage to, as you were dying, to just laugh in the Northern European cultures, just laugh about it, just have a jolly good time, as you're being like eaten by snakes, or like Ragnar Lothbrok was. and that's a brutal thought to think about. But it's like, yeah, that this idea that like you're fine. You're it's like radical acceptance almost. I live my life and I'm fine. I'm fine with dying now. I should note that oftentimes the eschatology, the afterworld aspect of our religion will get a little bit muddled by certain ideas that are probably influenced by Snorri in his Edda, as opposed to the Poetic Edda and other sources which predate Snorri. The afterlife is a little bit more complex than a lot of people. They reduce it down to Valhalla versus hell, and it's a little bit more complex than that, because they're like hell is sort of similar to the Greek Hades, and that it's like kind of a dark place. Nothing really goes on, but it's also not as bad exactly
Yes,
as people. A lot of people think of it as being like, because the idea is either you die in battle and go to Valhalla, or you die of sickness and old age and go to hell, where it's just cold and dark and everything sucks.
And
But
everyone
that's
there is old and sick. That's, I think,
exactly, yeah, and that's not really quite accurate, because if you look at the other sources other than Snorri's Edda, you can see that there was a little bit more nuance involved there. Like, for instance, I mean, they have banquets in hell, so it can't be all bad.
That's true. Yeah.
And then on top of that, there's evidence to suggest that hell is just like is almost like the first stop on your journey, and then you get sort of the gods actually are described as riding into hell every day to judge the souls, and then they'll send them to their afterlife. And so there are different like halls and whatnot that a soul can be sent to, but typically what ends up happening is the soul gets sent to a place that is similar enough to how they live their own life. And so that's really the principle of the matter, is the life that you live now is going to be similar to the life that you have in the afterlife, or the existence you have in the afterlife, I should say. So that's where you get this idea of, well, if you don't do anything with your life, if you didn't go anywhere, then yeah, you probably will be in sort of a cold, dark place just awaiting rebirth. Whereas if you actually do something with your life and you align yourself with a particular deity, you might get sent to their hall or something like that. So I figure like there are probably a lot of like fighters and whatnot. They'd probably go to Thor's hall if they lived their life as this kind of way. They might, and the crazy thing too is there's actually a source that gives the exact number of souls in Valhalla. And it's something like 2,500,000 they literally like peg a number for it. And so the thing that I think is funny about that is that like that shows that there's a limit. Like you can't, like not everybody gets to go to Valhalla, and that's something that's really important. And so in the LARPy like aspects of paganism, a lot of people think that they do this like bravado thing where they're like, I'm going to Valhalla and whatnot. And it's like, no, like the amount of people that get to go to Valhalla is like a tiny, tiny fraction of people. Like that's probably not you.
You're far more likely to get killed by Achilles than be Achilles. Like that's
exactly. It's so funny. So yeah, like it's easy to simplify it, but it's also a lot more complex.
And like, what would you make of me, or whatever suggestion I'm putting forward here about something like this would be interesting in how it could be re-baptized so that people could understand it in a more modern context? Because stuff like, I'm not sure if this is a horrendous offense. So like, I'm not trying to be disrespectful or rude, but like, I don't know, would people resonate with the idea of Valhalla or these complex theories of heaven? And I'm not saying that you kind of have to throw them out, but it's more like, it's almost like the ideas like aren't presented in a way that the modern mind can understand. Like a huge amount of what I do or what I'm doing on YouTube is presenting very, very old religious ideas in a way that modern people can understand. Like I'm making it digestible for the modern paradigm, if you will. And Jordan Peterson obviously did the same thing. I've never seen someone do that with paganism, and I've touched on it gently a couple of times. And I think there's actually something to it. Like, as I said, the metaphysics of paganism is probably more closer to science than the Christian metaphysics, which is fucking interesting. Because how much more? Like the metaphysics, the psychological description of emotion seems to suit Nietzsche's will to power, which is just simply Odinism in some sense. A little bit more than the kind of Christian conception of psychology. Only like morality is more Christian nowadays. So you've got this weird dichotomy, which is what Freud essentially is. So like things like this, like how do they get updated and presented for a modern person? How, and I don't mean like, you know, change it or whatever, but how do you suggest to someone like, this is what this means, or this is like tactilely in your life, this is what's going on here? Like, is Odin that rush of anger that comes up through your body and takes over you and tells you to do something? And to be a true pagan, would you have to, like, literally when your rage appears, do you have to listen to it? Like, is that what it is? Is it something like that? Because I actually think there's something to that. Like, I don't mean to be trivial about that. I think what I notice, I know this is a very taboo idea, but I notice dudes have a problem where they're just, and girls especially, have a problem where they're just not honest enough because someone pisses them off, and they have all this, like, this reason going on that they shouldn't react, when probably the most sincere and helpful thing for them would to just be like stand up for themselves and like and bite back, you know what I mean? And have that kind of like a little bit of savageness. And I'm just not sure if you went around promoting that fully, would society fall apart? Or maybe, and this is a very serious thing, like maybe if people were just like more allowed themselves to be more blunt in that type of facility, would you start to see the great, you know, very brutally honest cultures of Germany, Sweden, and England, and the Dutch and all that? Is that one of their great powers, is that they are actually just more sincere about what they think and what they feel in some sense? Do you sort of follow what I'm saying? Is that on what resolution would we be able to paint the modern world with these ideas?
It's really difficult to like the idea of like repaganizing the modern mind. That's not exactly the easiest thing to do. I definitely think a step in the right direction is to reassert the priesthood. That I think definitely helps, because if people had priests that they could go to, and priests who were trained in not just theology but philosophy and psychology as well, I think that if you had if you could actually go to these people for advice, that would be tremendous. That'd be great, because that would help sort out a lot of problems, and also like as far as morality goes and whatnot, the priesthood mattered tremendously for moral quandaries and whatnot. So that would certainly be beneficial. But yeah, like the idea of how does one live their day-to-day life with the...
Well, what I'm getting at here is that the pagans, like the idea that this was a religion is just stupid. Like that's not how they saw things. They saw it as literally reality. Like it's not some, like we think, oh, this thing. That's not how they saw things.
Good point.
They looked out in the world and they're like phenomenologically described their world using these words. I think they just simply called it tradition. It's not even a thing. It's not a separate thing at all. The Romans were the same. They didn't see religion. The religio was habits. That's sort of what it means. It means ritual. It means return in that sense. Like they would just look out in the world, and when they'd see someone acting brave, they'd be like virtuous. And that is a god and a concept at the same time. There's no division between this stuff. And
this is actually quite funny, because it's what you're getting at is that this doesn't require a leap of faith.
Perhaps. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you just do it. You don't.
Yeah. This doesn't, like, you don't have to trust in like something will catch me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is more like just act like this.
Yeah.
Just go out and do it.
It's also to take a bridge or build a bridge. It's something where you say, well, we just observe how you're harmonizing with the word, like the same way, like what, as Steph said, it's like they just saw it as like, well, you are attuned to life. And this is something when you say like coming from like the problems what the pagans have, it's like, oh, you have to know, like you have this concept of this God. It's like, well, in some sense, this market is, I'm phrasing this as a market and not to be disrespectful, but just to see like how successful it has been. It's like what has been swept over by yoga. It's like there people are always saying that, well, are you harmonizing with your environment? Where's your attention? Where's your awareness? Are you harmonizing with that? Are you witnessing that? Are you witnessing that? And in some sense, the uprising of that, well, I am actually harmonizing with those, not just cognitive concepts, but the spirit of anger in me and in others, or the spirit of sadness in me and in others. Like this is already, you can get the people already there, and they don't like that. From the perception standpoint, like people are longing for that everywhere.
Yeah, and this is really what I want to press on. Like this is what I've noticed just from studying all religions. When Julian says the spirit of anger and the spirit of sadness, like that even is a very modern take. Like they would just simply say anger. They would say Aries. Like Aries literally was that experience. Sadness is the same. A Christian's no different. A Christian, when you were sad, a Christian would be like a demon. They would say Satan, something like that. Like they didn't really have the words as we understand them. They that's the way they conceptualize. Like I live with a Christian, and that's like when her brother got sick. That was the situation. Like I was like, "What's wrong with him?" She's like, "He's infected by demons." And I was like, "Oh, you mean like psychology's gone?" She's like, "There's like demons in him." I'm like, "Oh, sorry, fuck." But that type of thing, it's a worldview way of seeing things. And I guess I'm not trying to say that's the sort of death of God thing. Is it's actually the fact that we can't allow ourselves to see the world in that magical animated way. Instead, we have to look at the world and always rationalize everything to make it flat. And so your anger can't be in any way connected to something. Like, for example, take this thesis: everything's made up of energy. Energy has a will to power, and then every single emotion you have is an expression of that energy. Therefore, when your anger comes up, it's actually like the universe speaking through you. And so you should say treat anger almost like a personality that's trying to push the universe towards the glorious conflict, which will make you stronger. And so you should always trust anger because it's pushing you towards conflict. And conflict, as Julian said, will bring you out on top if you win, and you will die. So you must be willing to die. And that entire thesis actually has a coherence. It's just very fucking scary. And if you invest all in on that, as that's the reality that's going on, and you trust the instinct all the time, as in you trust the God, it will take you somewhere. That's a whole worldview. But we won't allow ourselves to believe that. We just say anger is just an emotion. That is just a thing that just happens. And that's as shallow as we get. And that's a very, very interesting thing, because I wonder with stuff like paganism and reconstructionism and putting this stuff back together, like again, like I might have a horrendously offensive take in it for people who are more into this. So I do apologize, but I think there's very much something to this. It's like that's a very serious angle you could start asking questions about. Cool.
I definitely like thinking of it in those terms. I think that it makes perfect sense because oftentimes in the modern world, we like to put all these separations and delineations amongst our life and our reality and our experience and whatnot. When, of course, the pre-modern way of thinking of this, the antiquarian, the ancient way of thinking of these things was that it was very holistic. Everything was connected. Everything was there wasn't this like, okay, and now I'm doing religious stuff now, and then I'm going to do like mundane stuff and no, it was like that just is your life. Like you're like just going to bloat, going to ritual is not you're not doing something that you're not normally doing in your everyday life. You should be doing the same thing. Basically, you should be thinking in the same like divine paradigm. And so that would include your emotions or everything. I mean, I personally, when I go to the gym, I always like to think that I'm doing sort of like a ritual to Thor. That helps me. I mean, in fact, sometimes if I'm trying to like lift a particularly heavy PR, I'll actually do like a ritual to Thor before I go to the gym. I've done that before. and yeah, like the amount of confidence that gives you is like
love
you
it.
feel like you're being possessed by Thor in that moment, and that's pretty cool. Because there's something to that.
I do. Like when I say that thesis that the whole universe is made up of energy, and as Julian said, we know this thesis that in nature the two lions fight and the stronger lion comes out on top, and you as the weaker lion must have an understanding that if you die, that's for the greater good, and that's how paganism works. It is actually about an inequality fundamentally, and so the rage that these two lions had pushed them to fight against each other. And it's almost like the entire universe is driven towards higher goals by this rage, by this constant attempt to fight. It's a very, very honest way that things operate. And so the energy as it appears in your body is actually rage. That's what all that rage is. It's just this big surge of electricity. And when it shows up in you, you
It's
actually
also how
should.
the Iliad starts, right? Like
Yes, the
use of
begins.
rage. Yes.
And you like when that rage shows up in you, when Aries shows up in you and it screams at you, fight that person because they disrespected you. You should, on all circumstances, obey. Now that's a very intense idea, but like it would make sense that you should obey that, because then you would compete with that person, you would destroy them, and you would achieve victory. And then what would happen is you have proven that you are worthy of Odin, or you've failed, and then you should bow and say, I'm not good enough. And there's a sort of intelligence to that where it's like it's connected, it's holistic. It's like your anger is coming out of it's the universe moving forward through you. And obviously there's a more sophisticated talk about like, all right, how do you regulate rage in the modern world and all this stuff like that, but on the root, that actually has a coherent way of seeing things. And so with something like Thor, like when you're trying to like improve and like reach towards higher and become this sort of personification of divine justice and power and righteousness and masculinity, like Thor is that energy, that desire, that urge inside you. And is that connected to this sort of energistic way of seeing the world? And I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure how you go about reconstructing that, but I think there's ample space for something like that to happen. So I don't know, just a spitballing here, I guess.
It's a healthy outlook, I think. Now, I guess the question is like, should you give into those feelings every time?
Yes.
And
yes.
then that's tough, because it's like, well, okay, if you do so, are you participating? You're participating in the universe's kind of game, right? But you're also sort of not exercising your own will to power in that moment. Because of course you are an energetic force yourself. You don't have to necessarily just be possessed by any other energetic force that exists. So perhaps it's goal oriented. Perhaps that sometimes you can sort of subvert this one emotion for a higher goal. And that's actually something that I think Christianity does right, that paganism could learn from, is transcendence. So rather than giving into every feeling that you have, every moment of weakness or possession, I guess, you can subvert that and strive for something higher. And I think that's a really good quality in Christian religions. And it's also prevalent, of course, in Hinduism and Buddhism. So the Vedic religions definitely developed this. And so my question is, were European paganism allowed to progress? I suspect that it probably would have acquired this transcendent quality, like the way that it did for the Hindus. I feel like now that might possibly.
It did.
That's a really interesting take. That's really interesting.
It did. So exactly what you're talking about. Ares was the representation of anger. Zeus hated Ares. All of the gods hated Ares because he would get them in fights all the time. And so actually Ares had quite a low status in the pantheon. And the idea was that you obey Zeus. Zeus is still a bit of a crazy fuck, but he was very smart and he would like have long-term vision. Athena, the goddess of strategy, a feminine idea of submission and subversion, as you're saying, was actually the most respected war god of them all. Like exactly what you're talking about. They did achieve that. That's fundamentally true. Odin was at the top of the Norse pantheon along with Tyr, wasn't he? And Tyr was the god of kind of more reserved and law and whatnot. So absolutely, like, and that's a brilliant point. Nietzsche says this as well. Mass morality is by no means the way forward. It's slave morality that can tame mass immorality. So you need to have the juice, but then you also need to tame the juice. That's the only way we're going to go forward.
And I should note that even in the story of Odin, this is the crazy thing, is you get this transcendent principle explained in his story of how he sacrificed himself for knowledge. And we can see etymologically that Odin is related to the Indo-European god. In Hinduism, he's known as Rudra, and Rudra is the god of the storm. His name means the howler. He's a war god. He's like a terrible monstrous deity. Super ridiculously powerful. And Rudra is sort of invoked for conquest and whatnot. He's spoken about in the Rig Veda. But we know that Rudra is the same deity as Shiva. And Shiva is, of course, this very transcendent, he is a destroyer deity. He's literally labeled as the destroyer, but he's often seen meditating, and so what we know from this story is that Rudra, this unleashing force of energy, the god of the war band, the howling winds, becomes this tranquil, transcendent Shiva. And we can see the same thing paralleled in Odin, because of course his Proto-Germanic name was Wodenaz, meaning like the fury. It's similar to Rudra. And there are so many comparisons between these two deities that now the school of thought is that they were the same deity once. The names for the two split off. There's a lot of like scholarly work showing this at this point. So Wodenaz, the god of the war band, this fiery storm monster war god, sacrifices himself on the world tree, hangs upside down, pierces himself on the side, deprives himself of food and drink for 9 days, and just like stares into reality this whole time. Is just staring into reality to give him better insight, to give him the infinite knowledge and wisdom and the whole nine. He's trying to achieve transcendence, and then when he does, the Havamal describes him plunging into existence, like he as in the moment when he achieves the state, it's like he falls from the world tree into the pool of existence that he's staring in, and as he falls, he's like screaming, and so that's how he became the god that he is today. And that, I think, is clearly a very transcendent story, and it parallels Shiva's transcendence as well.
Yes, like that's.
Yeah, it's actually because this resonates quite a lot with me, because this is kind of difficult to like, but how I believe Icelanders are taught how this works. Then Odin isn't the war god, even though his name literally is Odin. Like, if you're older, you're mad. So it's kind of like the madness something.
Yes, yes.
But I just wanted to get into, because there are, with this whole like the transcending the emotions, because this actually gets quite Jungian in a sense, because every god gets humbled. So the stories are actually showing you the flip side of everything. So, and this is often Loki who is like who is tricking them into doing a lot of stuff. Some random pictures just popped into my mind, but he is always like, he is the trickster figure, and he and even like showing. There's this one story where Odin, with Thor he's gonna drink from this horn that he is sitting at the table with the ice giants, and they're having this competition, kind of this eating competition. And Thor is just like, I'm the mightiest of them all, I can drink this, and he starts to drink from this horn. But he doesn't realize that this horn contains all the oceans in the world. So he just keeps on chugging this up, and they had this eating competition. as well, and then the ice giants, they let him compete against fire. So the fire is the one that it just consumes. So there are limitation to the deities that and that are shown through the stories. And even though Odin is the wisest one, he doesn't know what Loki is up to most of the time, but is always looking to punish him.
That's absolutely it. There is this conception of like the universe is just bigger than everything, and the gods are still stuck within it. Like, and as I said, the big challenge there, and this is an immensely difficult challenge on first principle, is that, well, if God created a universe, then he's clearly bigger than the pagan gods. But we don't know if that's a bit of an attempt of Christianity to headfuck the pagans as well. Like we just don't know. That's a very hard problem. But from that first principle, if you can get the clear pagan first principle, for example, the universe is made up of energy, which is actually a pretty scientific statement. And then energy is the emotions, and so Odin is an energy that's moving through you or something like that. Like that's isn't that a modern take on what they were trying to say that actually makes coherent sense? And if I was to suggest anything about, like, in terms of, say, if you wanted to promote this stuff or try to speak to people on their terms about these ideas, because this is one thing I noticed, is that this is just not well done at all. Like, it's very, very obscure and difficult for people to get into it. People say stuff like gods, and no one explains to them what a god means. Like, they don't even do that with Christianity that well. And that's actually a big deal, man, because if you're going to throw jargon at people, you're going to have to actually explain to them what it means on a very fundamental level. This is why I'd be so specific about, and you have to do it this way, connecting the metaphysics to the emotional. There has to be a relationship there, because that's what it was like for a Christian. Satan was literally the bad mood you would get in. Odin was literally the anger you would get in. And I would suggest that if we're talking about a Boyo University project with this group, and I'm sure it'll expand and might contract, I'm not too sure, but that would be something to look at as being like, now, like I'm not saying like it has to be done this way, but it'd be something to look at as being like, if we were to I don't know, present this in its best steel man possible, wouldn't it have to tick on these boxes? A coherent, holistic, metaphysical statement about the way that emotions in the world works. And then you present it to people and say, like, this isn't about, digest my set of beliefs and download them into your head and then do religion as this kind of part-time thing. Like, if it was real, it would be like everything makes sense and is connected in a coherent way. That's the only way it would make sense to me. And then the Christian one is on the flip side. Like, it's the same thing with that religion. When I'm talking to people who want to revive Christianity, I say the same thing. I'm like, man, you can't go with Jungianism. Like, it has to be Jesus Christ lives in heaven, or else it doesn't work. It's that simple. You know what I mean? So yeah, any thoughts on some of these rants, or what am I going on about?
I do think that that's like a strong suit of paganism that Christianity doesn't share, is like, for Christianity to be true, you can't do the Jungian interpretation of Christ and whatnot. Like, it has to be totally accurate. Like you have to be, you are obliged to believe in the crucifix and the crucifixion and resurrection. Like, it's just baked into the cake. And so if you're not going to do that, then you're talking about something else that's distinct from Christianity. Whereas with paganism, yeah, like we've said before, it's the action, it's the doing that matters. But yeah, to sort of incorporate the emotional aspect to it, the psychological aspect to it, that was actually what even brought me to your channel, Stefan, is my desire to incorporate the psychological aspect. Because if I want to be a member of the clergy, if I want to be a pagan priest, I need to be able to connect with this. I need to be able to do that kind of work. Because I think that's the stuff that's going to matter for people. Because people
100%.
Like it's great. Like the theology and whatnot is great, but there's something in a person's life that they need order in their own life, and they need to be able to understand themselves. And if they can understand themselves through a paradigm that is a religion, quote unquote, then that's great, and that's useful. But the religion won't progress if it doesn't have that aspect, if it doesn't have that real world connectivity with people.
100%, 100%. And I think you seem to have a level head about this stuff. Like, you're well able to talk about Christianity and give it its merits. I find a lot of people who like are pagan, they're like, you know, they sound like Richard Dawkins with this stuff, but you're able to be like, it's got like a lot of stuff going for it, and that's fantastic. And you're able to, you know, for example, we could be like, energy is the fundamental force of the universe, and your anger is the Odin speaking, and you're like, yeah, but you know, we got to think perhaps that maybe we can't just go around beating the shit out of each other like lions. And of course, there needs to be like order and all that stuff. And if you go in with that attitude, but try to bring it to people at that level, like it's stuff that they can feel. It's not like, here's a theory, abstraction. It's like that tingle that runs up through your gut when someone insults you, maybe Odin speaking. What do you think about that? Like, that's very specific. And if you can paint a metaphysical story on top of that, that actually has scientific coherence, fuck, dude, you've really got something there. Like, I really think there's something to that. So
I think the experience that and I tell this to everybody who goes, oh, I'm interested in paganism. I say, okay, we'll go to a ritual. And they're like, oh, okay, but I want to like read about this and whatnot. And it's like, that's great. Yes, like you can read all day about it and it's interesting and whatnot, but that's not for everybody. Everybody is not meant to be the scholar. And for a long time, it was understood that the common thing that people would say is, oh, paganism is the religion with homework. You're going to have to do a lot of reading to figure things out. And it's like, no, that's a terrible way to bill it, because then you're putting the level for entry is like way too high for most people. And that's not even accurate to what the ancient world did. Like, most people were not scholars. Most people were not expected to be priests. And that's totally fine. What matters is the doing, like we keep saying. And so I tell people whenever they're interested in this is, well, okay, go find people who actually do the rituals. And of course, I would say that you should probably try to find some people who are more inclined towards like theistic pagans, rather than like, because you can find these like atheistic pagans who kind of just do it for the LARP and whatnot. And it's like, you're not going to find that. You're not going to find the true spirituality in that. But if you can find people who genuinely believe it and believe it authentically, try to accurately reconstruct, but not just reconstruct for the sake of reconstructing, but like who are trying to live it, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter so much what our ancestors did. What matters is why they did it. And if you can find a group that knows the why and does the ritual, the feeling that you'll get is, I assume it's the same feeling that a peasant would have gotten by like walking into a cathedral. It's just the vibe, you know, it's just the energy. And when you and a group of people are all standing around in a circle and you're chanting Odin's name and you're passing the horn and there's a fire raging in front of you, you will get a feeling. There's something, and you'll begin. That's the closest way you can. That's the easiest way you can get closer to the understanding of what our ancestors felt in those moments. That's how you can actually. You can intellectualize it all you want, but it's the doing that is the important thing. And so that's what I always recommend to anybody who wants to get into it: is go do a ritual, go do the rite. Simple as that.
I would just add on top of that like I think where the rubber hits the road is about the moral challenge. And specifically, I don't mean like Christian morality versus nothing like that. I mean that the moral challenge for most people is, what do I do when I have an emotion? Like, for example, the Christian morality says every time you have the sexual desire, you should deny it unless you're in a marriage or something like that. And there's a very, like, I talk to a lot of dudes who are Christian. That's a massive problem for them, is the sexual thing. And I get it. It's a really tough issue. Actually, it's sort of beyond Christianity as well. And you see the way it's like the war in their soul, like that's where it goes on. That's actually like, that's where the belief starts to kick in. Like, if you tell someone that desire for sex is Satan, they actually probably are more likely to beat it if they believe it sincerely. Whereas if they don't believe it's Satan, they kind of just Jungian believe it's Satan, they won't beat it. They'll give into it, almost guaranteed, because they're not serious about it. And so that's sort of what I mean by when I'm bringing up this emotional thing, is that if you like anger is a good example, fear is another one, sex is another one. When those really strong emotions come up and someone's warring with them, if they have a modern lens and they just psychologize the emotion, they are going to make a certain set of moral judgments. They probably won't have any strong convictions either way because it's essentially nihilistic. But if they actually believe some type of coherent worldview that this emotion that's coming out of me right now is akin to, you know, the primal scream of Thor or Odin, and they believe that, and it's not just something that they intellectualize, as you said, that will change their choice. And I think that is truly fundamentally what it means to practice something like this, because it's not something you get to choose to practice. It's fundamentally they see the world that way and they have to make that choice. I'm not sure if I sound a little bit obscure there, but I think that's in my mind the only way that could make sense.
It's just a couple of thoughts on that, because it's kind of like, I think the Norse paganism solves some stuff that Christianity doesn't solve, like regarding sexuality and all that, because they were strict, not strict, but there were moral guidelines with regard to marriage and how you should conduct yourself within a marriage, and there was a time and a place for the sexual desires, and they were not like forbidden at all. So it's kind of Norse paganism kind of solves the rage and the sexual thing that, you know, you could see was a massive problem, especially at Victorian age in Europe. But maybe and this is actually maybe a question for you, Connor, because there's a strange relationship with evil that isn't like Christianity is always like Christianity versus evil, and evil is it's a different thing altogether in the Norse. It's almost and I almost want to say it's not there, but it's kind of there, but kind of not there, because
I don't think it's there, no.
It's kind of like, and there is a point to that. Evil is when you don't act, but it's not evil. Do you guys?
Bad.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
But there isn't. It's so strange. It's kind of like, I don't know. Do you like how is your stance with evil?
Yeah. Okay. So the problem of evil in the Christian lens is that God allows evil because good can come out of it. And I feel like it's good.
Yeah, that's one of the. I mean, Christianity is
there's a
all over
lot
the
of
place.
different. Yeah. And so, but yeah. So to contrast it as like, okay. So yeah, the question of what is evil in paganism. I usually think of it as just that which is against the gods. And so in a and it is kind of like, you could kind of say that like the gods are order, and so evil then is chaos, is the lack of order. But it's tough to even say that that's evil, because it's more like just unconsciousness. Like it's just the primordial chaos was one of unconsciousness, and like for instance, like the ice giant, the primal ice giant Ymir that Odin and his brothers slay in order to create the universe is described as like sleeping. It's like a sleeping giant. It's also undifferentiated. It's a hermaphrodite, and it just kind of like births these things out of its body. And so when Odin and his brothers slay Ymir and create the universe out of it, they're sort of like taking the unconscious and making it conscious, and so everything that comes from Ymir, or a lot of things that come from Ymir are like the Jotuns, like the frost giants and the fire giants and whatnot. These are destructive forces in the world. They are chaotic forces, and they should be resisted, and they are enemies of the gods. and then you have the gods who are establishing order. And so that's usually how I tend to think of it, is the things that create order are good and should be aligned. You should be aligned with them. And then the things that are chaotic exist and you should resist them. Now, there is this tendency in modern pagans to think that you can align yourself with the forces of chaos, or somehow that the forces of chaos should be aligned with or respected, or in some way. Like there's this phenomenon of the Lokian who are like Loki worshippers. Now, bear in mind that there's no historical evidence that any ancestors ever worshipped Loki. So like we don't find like statues of Loki and whatnot. That doesn't exist. There's no devotional artifacts of Loki. There are depictions of him, but there's nothing in a religious context. So it's funny that people will do that. Will like leap to this idea that, oh, well, we should, our ancestors may not have venerated the forces of chaos, but we should. That's something that we should change. I think that's completely false, because like when you really think about it, chaos exists. Like the law of entropy just exists in our universe, and you can either give in to the law of entropy and just kind of let yourself wither and die, or you can go out and then do something with your life. Eat food, I guess, would be like the eat food, drink water. Because if you don't eat food and drink water, you'll wither away and die. Like entropy will take place. But if you are affirming life by doing something as simple as eating food and drinking water, or doing things that are healthy and whatnot, doing things like create a family, you are actively resisting entropy. You're actively resisting chaos. And that is good, I think. That is the essence of goodness.
Yeah, and it's also kind of like, because they were just chats. So like if somebody that was menacing, like I'm thinking about like a person coming to hurt you, like consciously trying to do some evil, trying to, I don't know, torture your family or something, you would just murder them, and evil gone.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but yeah.
It is Nietzsche's commentary on the nature of primitive religions, which is like, he liked them. He was like, there is no such thing as evil, because evil is an absolute category that doesn't exist in the world. That's his statement, not mine. And he said that
that's interesting.
There is no
I'm actually this is kind of breaking my brain a little bit right now, because it's just like, okay,
that's because what he said.
Yeah.
Because it's not actually there. It's evil as a contextual thing. Like you're if you hear the way people use evil nowadays, they'll say, for example, Trump is evil. But all that means is that I don't like Trump. Trump is negative. Trump is trying to destroy the world. But like no evil person has ever successfully destroyed the world. Like it has never worked that way. There's been bad people who've done terrible things, but no one has ever ended the world. Like it's just not that type of thing. It's not absolute enough. And so there is this vibe that like the master moralities just didn't have the concept as an absolute concept, just like they didn't necessarily have a concept of an absolute good is the way we think it. You're always moving towards the good or something like that, but it's these things are just way more fluid in these religions, and I think they're very, very interesting, because I think the way that we understand reality is a bit closer to this idea of good and bad versus good and evil, and that's sort of what he means by the idea of beyond good and evil. It's a fucked up idea, and I'm not too sure about it either, but for evil to exist, you have to make that claim that God invented evil for a reason, and that's a very fucking intense idea, man. It's like, are you torturing us or something? Like, what the fuck's going on here? That makes you have to reframe reality as literally a torture chamber where he's testing you to bring you into heaven. That's pretty much the only way I think that can be resolved, and that's a very intense idea, bro. Like your God. That's the Gnostic idea. Your God tortures you, so he can test you to see if you're good enough to let you hang out with him. It's like, whoa, I don't know, man.
And not just that, but like he created you specifically to be tortured, to like see if you're cool enough to like, yeah. It just seems when you get right down to it, it just seems kind of sick. And I don't really like to do the whole value judgments on Christianity. A lot of pagans do. A lot of pagans like to say, oh, well, the Christian God is just a mean, cruel, evil God and whatnot. And I'm like, oh, okay, but like you're kind of falling into their frame by even using the word evil, or like by thinking of it like that. It's tempting to do so, but like just kind of distance yourself from that whole concept of good and evil in a way. Like try to think of it. If you can go beyond good and evil, then a lot of things kind of open up for you. A lot of things kind of make more sense.
The only like, because I don't like telling people to do this without offering them some type of alternative, and it's not like I even think people take the alternative serious, because this is just such a crazy big thing to be going on. But if someone's like struggling with this, I think the intellectual way to understand it is that, for example, as you say, the universe is made of entropy, and it's always floating back towards more entropy. And so it's actually a positivist idea that no matter what happens, you're always going to sink back towards entropy, but you can push towards good all the time. And that's literally all you got, like this constant struggle towards good. And that pretty much defines life as we know it. And I think that's a bit more accurate to the way things work. And there is no necessarily like absolute evil. It's just that everything will eventually fall back to the baseline. And you are participating in shooting it up to something higher. But that's, I think, actually nihilistic in the end, because it's like, does that mean good is eventually going to lose? And then there's your big question. That's the kind of Ragnarok idea. In the end, does the gods lose to entropy? And I think that the answer is yes. And then I think Nietzsche's idea, this is why Nietzsche was anti-paganism as well. Nietzsche's idea is that the Übermensch will defeat entropy or something like that, something along those lines. Like he'll just, if we create an Übermensch, he will start to solve these problems. He will like rip a hole in the universe, escape into that Uber universe, and then that's entropy over, or he will change that. Like, you know what I mean? Like he just says.
Well, okay. So the idea of like beating entropy. Well, okay. So here's the crazy thing. I think that was what Odin was trying to do. I think that was Odin's goal. And
but North Smith suggests that Odin was trying to find, using magic, trying to find a way to change his destiny, which was that entropy was going to kill him. And he ended up not being able to do it. Is that? I thought that was.
But
go on.
But okay, so here's the twist though. This is like the brilliant thing, because of course, okay, so what I really love, this is something that as I was reading the stories, I came to this realization. There are so many stories where Odin goes to seeresses, like we talked about in the Havamal, where he's just asking questions to know the future. Because it's funny because he's known as like this all-wise God. He should know everything, and yet he's continually asking people for visions of the future. He's asking seeresses about the future. He's asking giants about the future. He goes to any source that he can to find out about his future and the future of all of existence. And what I think is amazing about this is it's like he already knows the answer, but he's still trying to learn about it. Almost as if he's trying to like break the game. Like he's trying to figure out, he's trying to like get any information that he can. And so he'll even like ask questions like, when Balder dies, Odin whispers into his ear something that remains a mystery. We don't know what that something is. And he goes to a giant at one point, a giant who's supposed to know everything, and he asks the giant, what did Odin wish? And he's in a disguise. He's not advertising that he's Odin. He usually doesn't advertise that he's Odin. And he asks this all-wise giant, what did Odin whisper in his son's ear? And the giant goes, the fact that you're asking me that means that you are Odin, because only Odin knows what Odin whispers into his son's ear. But it's almost like he was trying to like, I don't know where that story takes place chronologically, but like it would be funny to think that he was asking, he knew that he would whisper something in Baldur's ear, and he's asking the giant what that is so that he can whisper it like a time loop.
But that's the thing that he whispers is also the thing that he uses to defeat that exact giant at Ragnarok. There's that loop there. Just to young this up, I just opened the page at the exact. My eyes just fell into it, man. where he is talking about the secret that Odin whispered into. He's in disguise, and he asked Vafthrune what he whispered into Baldur's ears. And then it adds, this question brought Odin victory in their combat.
Battle of wits. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's whoa.
That's interesting. Yeah. So what my purpose in talking about this is that we know in the Ragnarok narrative, Odin is consumed by the wolf Fenrir. He's eaten, and we can interpret this as like Fenrir is like this like devouring chaotic force. It's like entropy itself in like it's almost like its most raw form, as it consumes everything, and it consumes even the Allfather. But before this, of course, Balder is killed and goes to hell. What I like about the story is at the end of Ragnarok, when all the evil goes forth and like breaks the gates of hell, like the evil in there's if you get deeper into it, there's like this lower part of hell called Niflhel that is where like the punishment goes on, and it's described that like the darkness of Niflhel like bursts open up into hell and bursts the gates open and flows forth, and that's like the force of evil that or like chaos that the gods have to fight amongst a bunch of other forces. And when that happens, Balder in hell, along with his brother Hoder, who inadvertently killed Balder, they just walk out. They walk out the gate behind these like chaotic forces. And so after the whole world is destroyed, Balder and Hoder are just out there. They survive the destruction, and they are two of the gods who do survive. Magni and Modi, Thor's sons, also survive, and they sort of pick up the pieces. And literally, they pick up the pieces like it describes them picking up like board games. Like they were like, it was like chess. Like they found chess games that the gods had played, and it describes them like picking up the pieces of these and like remembering what their life as gods in the old universe. And then Magni and Modi like find Thor's hammer Mjolnir, and they inherit the hammer, and like Balder and Hoder reconcile, and it's kind of understood that like Balder takes his place as the new Allfather. And of course, Balder is Odin's son, and the Norse believed, all of our Indo-European ancestors believed that your children were like your reincarnation in a way. They like had a part of your soul. And so it could be understood that Balder survives Ragnarok by being and is like this reincarnation of Odin. And Odin sort of, it's sort of a play. It's a strategic move of Odin to allow Balder to die and be sent to hell, only for him to come exit hell at the end of Ragnarok. And Balder is Odin's reincarnation. Balder is Odin living on. So Odin does actually win in the end against the forces of entropy in his son Balder. And it requires sacrifice. Yes, it requires Balder to die. And certainly I don't think Odin wanted that, but he knows that that's the only way that it can happen. And I think that's what Odin whispers into Balder's ear on his funeral pyre is sort of like the knowledge that the sacrifice that the gods will live on in the new new universe.
That is like unbelievably profound in like the moral, the wisdom punch you get out of that notion that fundamentally sacrifice is what will beat entropy. Like that's just fucking huge, because that is the same as the Christian message. I love when you dig down to these fundamentally, they just start to smash on the same virtues so hard, and it becomes that big of a deal. Gentlemen, I really have to bounce, I'm afraid. I've got to go fight the forces of entropy in the gymnasium with Thor. Me and Thor have got a date. This was a great talk. I can make one of you a host if you want to just go on for maybe a couple of more minutes.
Yeah, I'll be down for that. Would you?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I have some interesting